Got to get some Coca-Cola in before we get started. This is the Too Many Points show on the Tell Me More podcast. We never have good openings, and I think fans come back for that specifically, so that's why I keep delivering it. I'm actually doing a very good job of doing a bad job. Bad job at introducing the people that are on the pod. We got Justin Pemberton always coming back, but Colin Wright, we had you on Last Dance. Have we had you on too many sports pods?
I think once, but it was in the fall. It's been 5 or 6 months. I wouldn't have a baby, and so I can use that as an excuse, right?
I'm blaming myself mostly. I keep thinking I need to have Colin on more, and we've had you on for a lot of Q crews, but I keep forgetting on any of the sports stuff. But how's the little baby doing? What is the name? Winter? Is that the little baby?
Yeah. So she was born today. She's 5 weeks old. So she's doing much better than I assumed. I know that with infants, sometimes they just cry for no reason, and she does. She'll tell us when she's not happy, but she's sleeping pretty well. I don't want to jinx it, but we're still up a couple times during the night, but then she's right back to sleep. And so I was lucky enough to take 7 weeks off from work. So I'm off work another week, and then I'll go back in a couple weeks. But no, I mean, she's great. I feel like the one thing I will say is I don't know how people have more than one. My wife and I can take care of one baby, and it's a lot of work, but it's rewarding. She's adorable. She's super fun, and she gives us little smiles, and she's already in 5 weeks, she's already learning more and more. There's certain things she's doing now she wasn't a couple weeks ago. So that's really fun. But yeah, the people that keep having 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, I don't know how they do it. We're good with one for a long time.
You're not going to go the Philip Rivers route and have a dozen?
Man, I don't have that kind of money.
Well, I mean, and Philip Rivers has that kind of money, so it's I guess if you can afford it, go for it. But I assume the baby slept well during you yelling during the Chiefs game. You didn't have to yell that much. This one, I mean, if you were just going to get excited for every play, there was a lot of things to get excited for, but none of the fear something bad happening. Because I think for most Chiefs fans, as we all are, this is a very biased podcast.
Did we lose Mac there?
Yeah, I thought I was going to freeze for a second, and here we are.
Hello, Mac. Are you there?
All right.
There we go.
Okay. Apparently, my Thunderbolt cord is a little loose, and so I flicked it, and it connected my. So, did you guys have fun? I don't even know how StreamYard works when the host gets kicked out. Were you able to just keep talking? I'm gonna have to look back at the.
Well, we sort of paused there for a minute, and I'm just like, "Is Mac there?" And then we laugh, and then I'm like, "Hello, Mac," and then all of a sudden they just came back. So
apologies to the audience who sat there with a blank screen for however long.
I must have said the magic word or something. So you're welcome.
Well, all right. So back to the Chiefs. None of the struggles that I've had with getting the internet to work and live streaming. Chiefs did not have any of those type of struggles for their game against the Buffalo Bills. They were just playing at the level that, I think I mentioned on last week's pod that we couldn't assume they were going to play like they did in last year's playoffs. We thought maybe that, just because it wasn't there in the regular season, they'd get in the playoffs. They didn't get the chance to show they would do that against the Browns because Patrick Mahomes left the game. Well, they showed it against the Buffalo Bills. So not the same type of even the comeback, where I think part of it is we all know Patrick Mahomes can come back from down 10, but also the circumstance of this one, having the muff punt. I think we were more angry at Mecole Hardman than we were concerned that Patrick Mahomes could recover from this. And sure enough, they just lit them up thereafter. So we'll talk about the Chiefs and how that played out. The other game being Buccaneers, Packers, and This one, a battle of quarterbacks that, they played really well at times. They also, Tom Brady threw 3 interceptions, and it didn't matter. Tom Brady found a way to do what he always does. He advanced to a 10th Super Bowl in 21 seasons and just 19 as a starter. So 50% there. Tom Brady is ridiculous. And even if you try to count in, other factors, team, whatever, the point is it's always that guy. So we're going to talk about that, his legacy, and we're going to talk about on the other side, Aaron Rodgers, a little bit salty with the fact that he didn't get one last play to try to win that game. Instead, they kicked a field goal, and the Packers never saw the ball again. So a lot of stuff for us to cover. Just starting out, I'll just kick it to Justin with the Chiefs. What do you think is the biggest thing of this game? What's the biggest takeaway for you in the Chiefs just dismantling the Buffalo Bills?
Well, it's the fact that we finally saw the offense break out. We finally saw the offense have their best overall game. Probably since now these are 3 different options. We can go back to the matchup against Tampa Bay where we had the breakout from Hill when he had the 7 catches for 200 plus yards and 2 TDs in the first half. We can go back to the Baltimore game on Monday Night Football. We can go back to the butt whooping in Denver, 43-17, or we can look back at opening night. So there's actually 4 options. I'd probably say this is probably the breakout or the best offensive performance from the Chiefs probably since I'll probably go with the Baltimore game just because that's going into Baltimore. You proved you could beat the Ravens again when everyone thought the Ravens were going to get paid back from the previous couple times. But no, it was definitely the offense coming through. Mahomes never showed any rust or any signs of looking beat up, with the foot, or if it was, from the concussion or whatever from last week. He was just flat out phenomenal. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, the first duo in 50 years. I forget. It was like Ed Podolak and somebody else had over 100 yards receiving in 2 straight games in the playoffs. That was incredible. Just a phenomenal performance by the Chiefs offense. Defense, they did what they had to do. They got the turnovers. They got the stops when they needed to. And again, it wasn't a perfect game by the defense. They give up yardage, and that's just going to happen when you are a bend but don't break type of defense. And sure, Stephon Diggs, he was held and checked pretty well, but you knew he was going to have his few because he's a pretty good receiver himself, and Josh Allen was going to, have his moments too. So, overall, it probably should have been, 38. It should have remained 38-15. But the last few points Buffalo scored really didn't reflect on the game itself. The game itself was not very close, and the Chiefs just flat out dominated.
Yeah. I agree. Like the numbers would have been even less with not only getting the onside kick, you're scoring late to get back in it, and to still be down 2 touchdowns when you were spotted 6 points in the opening. You get to start up 9. It was an ass whooping. That's the only real way to describe it. But the one I want to get Colin in on real fast, since he hasn't been here for the most recent pods, our big rallying cry the last few weeks is yelling at anybody who says the way to beat the Chiefs is to run the ball, to hold just get as much time of possession and find a way to win. Bills had more time of possession through 3 quarters than the Chiefs. They were still down 24-12, even when spotted 6 points. Rushing the ball, Josh Allen had 287 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. But he to get to that point, he had to throw 48 times. Patrick Mahomes did the same damage and more efficiently, without the mistake of the interception in just 38 passes. And really the only thing Josh Allen did that was really good was he ran the ball a lot. 7 rushes, 88 yards, some big plays. I think one of them was like a 20-yard run. So he was able to get the job done on the ground. They were running better than they've run in recent weeks, and they had time of possession through 3 quarters. Once again, that does not matter, because the thing we've said every week is 40 points. Aim for 40 or you're wasting your time, as you saw them score 38. I just want to ask Colin, do you think that argument can just die? Do you think that's just done where people talk about it as the strategy for beating the Chiefs? Even teams like maybe the Ravens, where they're a run team, shouldn't every team, their strategy going against Chiefs is we have to figure out any way to get to 40 because that's the only way to beat Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, no, I never thought I'd say these words, but there really is no way to beat the Chiefs. Mahomes is 24-1 his last 25 starts, and that just doesn't happen in the National Football League. That doesn't happen. Like it. I mean, you see sometimes college quarterbacks where their schedules, like Trevor Lawrence, will go 24-1 over a 25-game stretch. In the NFL, no one should go 24-1 over a 25-game stretch. The only loss, of course, was the home loss a few months ago to the Raiders when Las Vegas scored 40 points. So that really is, if you're going to beat the Chiefs, if you can score 40, you have a good chance of beating the Chiefs, which sets us up for a fun Super Bowl matchup because I think the Buccaneers in their last 6 games averaged 33 or 35 points. So I don't know if they do that against the Chiefs, but they do have the weapons at least. And maybe even getting Antonio Brown back, they may be able to. But no, what the Chiefs did yesterday was, well, for the first time since November 1st, they beat a team by more than 6 points. I was looking back at the schedule this morning, and I was like, we beat the Jets 35-9, and then every win since then has been by 6 points or less, and they finally beat a team by double digits. So I think that was the most encouraging thing, was not only did they beat the Bills, who have been playing great, like 11-1 in the last 12 games. The Bills have been playing great, but they came into Kansas City, and the Chiefs are better the whole game. The funny thing I'll add is at the end of the first quarter, it's 9-0 Buffalo. I was more confident then than I was before the game. Like, when the Chiefs make mistakes in the playoffs, Mahomes has a way of just, like, fixing it so fast that before halftime, the Chiefs were not only winning, they're up by 2 possessions. And so going into the game, I felt good Kansas City was going to win, but it was even more confident when it was 9-0. And I was like, this game's over. Like, when you have a quarterback that's just electric, it changes things.
Yeah, I was going to say with the the idea that they're down and that's better. I'm never going to say it makes sense because the Chiefs should just be able to run up the same score anyways. But there is a mentality, there is a way that Patrick Mahomes plays when he knows he's down, and he just goes lights out. And part of it is defense. I think a lot of it's just the game theory that people have where, okay, we're up, we're protecting it now. And that's different than attacking and trying to get the ball because we need to score, And when you have that mentality, it's hard to get rid of that, but really you need to, because look at what a team like the Chiefs can do when Patrick Mahomes is like, I got to score. What happens? He scores a lot of points. And I think a lot of what the other teams need to do when they face Patrick Mahomes, that go for 40, like you might need to come in the game and like, I don't know, have scoreboards on the sideline that you control yourselves that say you're down 21 to start a game. Because that's the only way to really win is you need to come in and play with a mindset that says we're down 3 touchdowns. What do we need to do to get those? Because that's literally where you're at. You're basically, no matter how good you play, you have to beat out the Chiefs by 3 touchdowns because at any point in a game, Patrick Mahomes will catch fire and score 3 touchdowns in seconds. Like, he does it fast that you can't just assume. There is not a lead that's safe. And he did it in a Super Bowl. So this isn't like, oh, he randomly came back in a game. Isn't it amazing what he could do? He's doing it consistently in the most important games. And that's super scary. There's that, just when you go into a game, and we'll have to talk about this because we'll probably get even harsher when we talk about the Packers and field goals. But even for the Bills, you can't kick field goals. Like, when you're talking, and in fairness, the Chiefs until this game were not good in the red zone, right? This year, they scored touchdowns on 61% of their red zone possessions. They got it up to 71 in the last 3 games, thanks to this game, 83%. They were 5 of 6 in the red zone, 5 touchdowns, 6 possessions. Pretty good. That's not what the Chiefs had been doing despite this really great offense. They had scored from far out most of the time. Big breakaway plays. This time they showed that they could do that. And even if they couldn't, even if that's not where the Chiefs were, you weren't going to win this game as the Buffalo Bills if you are at the end of the half saying, hey, we're going to kick a field goal. We're not going to go on 4th and 3 from the 6-yard line. Like, you got to go. And then they did it again late in the game. So it's not even just a one-off like, well, we did it at half and we didn't know where the score would be. Well, first of all, if you can't protect a 9-0 lead, that's the exact moment you stop kicking field goals. The moment you watch a guy scorch you that fast and take a 2-possession lead in the first half, probably should give up the field goals a bit. Probably should just be like, no matter what, like fourth downs don't matter. I don't care if you're on and some of these. I'm not sure if Buffalo had punted on like a 4th and 9 or 4th and 15. I know there were a few of those in the Packers Bucs game. Just go for it then too. Like at this point, and I'm not just saying this is a crazy analytics person that plays Madden too much. Like when it's against Patrick Mahomes, it is Madden. That's what you're playing right now. You better just never kick a field goal. Justin, when you look at the biggest problems for Buffalo, we talked about the things for the Chiefs. Don't just say Chiefs are impossible to stop. We got that. We've covered that enough. But in terms of the Bills, what they didn't do to even get themselves in this game, what do you think were the biggest flaws of not Buffalo's game plan or just how they played in this one?
Well, for one, I was going to, have some thoughts on that, not going for it on that 4th and goal. And you're right there. Like they're at what, the 4-3 yard line, something like that. I mean, it was pretty simple, and they could have just done a simple run play. They could have used Allen. He could have scrambled it in there for a touchdown, and they would have been down by, let's see, that would have made it, a 6-point game, something like that, going into halftime. That's a costly mistake there. And I kind of feel that Sean McDermott kind of poo-pooed that away when he was asked about it. He's just like, this is a learning experience, which, okay, duh, it is. I mean, this is your first go-around, being in a conference championship game. And it was kind of like, Kansas City, 2 years ago. That was their first time being there in a long time. But you don't just poo-poo that away. And he should have explained that a little more better. Just said, I should have done better. That's on me. I should have gone for it. I should have been more aggressive, not just this is a learning experience. I feel he kind of poo-pooed that away, and Buffalo should have been better at that. I think they should probably ran the ball a little bit more, maybe. I think they maybe threw the ball more than they probably should have, maybe. But no, I think the biggest costly mistake was the not going for on the 4th and goal.
Well, I'm going to jump in. I love whenever I get a chance to disagree. They shouldn't have ran it more. They ran it nearly enough, and they had a lot of rushing yards. They did fine. That wasn't scoring for them, though. In the passing, the only reason they passed too much is because they weren't completing it. Josh Allen wasn't getting the ball out there. The Chiefs defense that at different times in the year has allowed offenses that have been great, offenses have been okay to move the ball on them, score on them. They absolutely made this a hell of a time for Josh Allen. Josh Allen ends up making some of the boneheaded mistakes that he had kind of cut out of his game late in the season. He had some of those where he, is playing lights out, but still would make some really dumb plays. Those were gone in the final 10 weeks, and those came back. And one early, one late, and that was a huge difference in the Bills even being in the game. I think in terms of, passing, it was just figuring out when to pass, figuring out who to pass to, and how to make plays when you are shutting down Stephon Diggs. And that's we talked about it last week. The Chiefs, if you're one-dimensional, and we know what the Chiefs know what you're doing, they can shut you down. Like, they're not great at being a complete, just stopper of a defense, but they can make big plays, they can make interceptions, they can get turnovers. And if they know, hey, best case scenario, you're going to Stephon Diggs, they're going to shut Stephon Diggs, and they're going to live with Cole Beasley running across the middle. They're perfectly fine with that being what your plan was. But the Bills had other players that throughout the year they got it to. Obviously, Stephon Diggs was the main one that ripped people apart. But they got it to other people. They didn't do that in this one. Josh Allen didn't do that in this one. And that ended up making it where they weren't even close. And that's probably the biggest surprise for me. It's not that the Chiefs won. It's not even that they won in walk-off fashion. It's that Buffalo needed a free 6 points. They needed an onside kick late. They needed all of this so that they could still lose by 2 touchdowns when Josh Allen might have been the only guy I thought could keep up with Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Tom Brady is a different animal, and the game will look a lot different, but I'm not just going to walk in and say Tom Brady can't keep up with him. But I'm looking at guys who played that way, played lights out. Josh Allen was the guy who could play at that same level when Patrick Mahomes goes, just out of this world ridiculous. Josh Allen had done that multiple times this year. That's not what he looked like this game. That was probably the biggest surprise for me. Colin, when you're looking at this game, you can either keep going on Buffalo, or if you just want to look at the Chiefs and, big things as Patrick Mahomes already matches the record for conference championship appearances, Super Bowl appearances, and he's already a Super Bowl MVP and has won a Super Bowl. So at this point, Patrick Mahomes is already the greatest in just 3 years, has already matched. The rest of the Chiefs' history doesn't even matter. But other things from that game that you saw from either the Chiefs or particularly Buffalo is faults that made it where they couldn't even get close.
Yeah, well, real quick on Mahomes, what he's doing is unreal. I'll add in that, Kansas City went 5 decades, 50 years without going to the Super Bowl, and now they're going 2 years in a row, which growing up as a Chiefs fan, like, you just wanted one. And now to be in it for a second year in a row, I mean, that's something I never thought I'd see. But I also never thought I'd see a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, and here we are. In looking at the game yesterday, the Chiefs and Bills, I feel like going into it, both game plan. We can laugh about it now, but the Bills' game plan was to slow down Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. The Chiefs' game plan was to slow down Stephon Diggs. And Diggs had some yards late in the fourth quarter, but I think through 3 quarters, Stephon Diggs had like 2 catches for 12 yards. And I looked at that and I was like, there's no way. Because I'd seen Stephon all season put up 120, 140, 105 against any defense. And going into the game, the Chiefs didn't have the best defense in the NFL. But you're right, Mac. When they decide to take something away from a team, that's exactly what they do. Whereas the Bills, I mean, you saw Kelce's numbers and Hill's numbers. Those are video game numbers. I mean, what Travis Kelce did. And the thing is, Buffalo knew Mahomes is going to snap the ball and throw it to Kelce. He's going to snap the ball and throw it to Kelce. And the Chiefs did it all game long, and Buffalo couldn't stop it. And this is a team that held Baltimore to 3 points last week. So it's not like the Bills don't have a defense. And for Kansas City to shred them apart, I was surprised to win by 14. And it actually could have been a lot more than that. I'll tell you, when Buffalo – because the Bills weren't out of the game in the second half, but with 5 minutes left in the third quarter, they were down 24-12. So it was still a reasonable game. They had the 4th and 3, and instead of going for 7 to make it a 5-point game, they kick a field goal and get the ball back to Mahomes, 24-15. So you're saying with 20 minutes left in the conference championship, we're going to give Mahomes the ball with a 2-possession lead, and that was right when Tyreek Hill had the 71-yard pass, and all of a sudden you're down by 16. Which is technically still a 2-possession game, but that's 3 scores in the last 18 minutes to win, and it's just not going to happen. So I think the Bills coaches just got out-coached. I really do. I think the Chiefs that had a great game plan, and the nice thing for Kansas City is they now have 2 weeks to get ready for the Buccaneers, and we all know Andy Reid with 2 weeks to prepare has a pretty solid record.
So when you talk about the Chiefs out-coaching them and the fact that you found a way to stop Stephon Diggs, but the Bills weren't able to do the same with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And part of it is it's that 2-person tandem. It's Patrick Mahomes who just won't be stopped. And then part of it was one of the greatest coaching decisions. So one of the worst is having Mecole Hardman back to return punts after seeing how poorly he's done it all year. He doesn't even have enough big plays from it to make up for his miscues. But that play happens, and normally coaches, they would punish a player. They would put him on the sideline and be like, you screwed up. That is to teach you to never fumble again. But Andy Reid doesn't. Andy Reid goes right back to him. He lets him do the end-around play that it's a 50-yard run. He ends up getting a touchdown. He only has 2 receptions, 4 yards in the game, but one of them is in the red zone, this touchdown play that other coaches wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have made plays that are specifically, we need your confidence to be up. Also, we know you're a burner. And if they're going to come in and try to stop Tyreek Hill, stop Travis Kelce, one, it's so hard because if you're putting 2 on Tyreek Hill, he's pulling everybody down the field, and Travis Kelce is just going to murder you across the middle. But even if you're able to find a way to keep Hill in check and stop Kelce from doing that, you can't do it if Mecole Hardman can take off the other side and go up the sideline for 50 yards. They are so good at finding plays, even a couple plays to Byron Pringle. And none of it's big stats. None of it's a huge deal. None of it's even close to what Sammy Watkins did, where there are some days, you shut them down. Sammy Watkins is going to burn you for 100 yards. Like they've had those performances. That's not even what's happening now. It is simply making sure that you can't just say, hey, these are the only guys we have to stop. There are other guys that aren't going to have huge stats by the end of the year, but they all are playmakers in some capacity. You just have to put them in the right position. And Andy Reid does it more than any coach. Finds a way to take these guys who are not necessarily consistent at being game breakers, but he knows what play to get a game breaker moment out of them. And that Mecole Hardman play, I don't even think the touchdown was as important because that could have gone to another guy. But that 50 yards is what got the Chiefs going where the Bills thought maybe we could slow down Patrick real quick here. Didn't happen. After that point, Patrick Mahomes just kept firing, and he ripped that Bills defense apart.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been really impressive is, we talk about home field advantage in the postseason and how it's a little different this year with stadiums being mostly empty compared to in the past. But, you look at the Chiefs worked all season to get that 1 seed. They benched their starters in week 17, and it was the right decision. Obviously, I don't think it was necessarily controversial, but there's always those people that are like, ooh, can Mahomes play a 21 days rest? That's a long time. We have the week 17, then you have the bye. And the Chiefs showed that they were the better team against Cleveland. They were the better team against Buffalo. Yep. And they're going back to the Super Bowl. And it is nice playing at home. Where in the NFC, you have a Buccaneers team that went on the road 3 weeks in a row, and they're able to win. And in a funny way, they finally get their 4th game as a home game. Because Tampa Bay was awarded the Super Bowl 5 years ago or whatever when Brady was winning Super Bowls in New England. So there's lots of storylines, but it doesn't get better than Brady versus Mahomes. I mean, I feel like it's going to be the most watched Super Bowl ever, but I don't know how those ratings will play out, but that's just my opinion.
And can we give credit to the crowd at Arrowhead, because that's only what, 16,000, 17,000 people there? I mean, it sounded like it was more than that. And you go to other games this year around other places, other stadiums, you don't get that same type of atmosphere. You don't get that same type of crowd noise. And, of course, a lot of it is being used by NFL pumping in fake crowd noise from the Madden game or something. And it's awful. But kudos to the people at Arrowhead, the crowd, the fans were just phenomenal. And it's amazing how, there not being a full jam-packed stadium like normal, but yet it can still sound like it is when you're watching it at home.
Yeah, and, we talk about home games. I really do hope it's different. The home games aren't the same, because I don't want the Chiefs to have to face Tampa in a home game. I think at this point I'm confident enough in the Chiefs. I'm not too concerned about it, but I would be a little more concerned if they were real fans there, if it was that type of. But in fairness, a Super Bowl is never a home game anyways, so it's not like because it's in Tampa, more Tampa fans are going to get tickets. They're going to be priced out of that. So maybe a little bit more just because it's easier. There might be more fans that can shell out for the high cost of tickets because they don't have to pay for the travel. But generally speaking, it's going to be a big mix that is not going to give you a true home game anyways. But Buccaneers find a way to do it. This is the worst told you so I get to throw at Justin, because I don't remember what week it was, but Justin hit me with the Buccaneers aren't going to make the Super Bowl because they have it in Tampa. And I'm like, that has no impact on whether the Buccaneers can make it to the Super Bowl. While it hasn't been done in history, it's not for any reason that actually impacts the game. It's just kind of, well, that makes sense because only one team could possibly do it each year. And most of the time it's the Patriots making it. And, you don't play Super Bowls in Boston, in Foxborough in February. So makes perfect sense that there's not a lot of opportunities for a team to be good the same year that the Super Bowl comes down. Like Colin mentioned, that's done in advance. I didn't want this to be the first year, but there's something about Mahomes being so good. Any other time you go up against Brady, you'd be like, I don't want to do this. And I was much more chillaxed than the average Chiefs fan when they faced him in the AFC Championship game a few years ago. But I still was not happy with going to face Tom Brady. There wasn't this let's see Patrick take down the GOAT. Didn't want to. Would have loved for Tom Brady to lose before that game, Now it's gone. That whole thing, and that's not saying Tom Brady has no chance. It's literally, now I do believe Patrick Mahomes is playing at a level, this team is playing at a level that I want to see him take down the GOAT. I want it to happen. And if it doesn't happen, it'll hurt a lot. Although Tom Brady has to get old at some point, I hope. And Patrick Mahomes, we got it for the next 10 years. So I'll be calm about it. But, seeing this happen, it's crazy. Let's go into the Bucs, and we'll start with the game before we get into the legacy talk. But holy crap, late game, we already mentioned some of it earlier with the field goal stuff. But we'll start with do you guys want to start with field goal or start with the defensive pass interference that got the Buccaneers the first down to close out the game?
That defensive pass interference call was trash.
Colin, do you agree?
Trash.
It was the right call, but they didn't call it all game. Like I was enjoying watching the game because I was watching both the Packers and Buccaneers defensive backs and safeties. They were pulling a little bit. There was a little grab on the hip, a little grab of the shoulder, and they weren't calling it. So watching the replay by the rule book, yes, he held onto his undershirt for long enough. That's a penalty. Right. But I feel like based on how they called the last 4 quarters, you keep your flag in your pocket.
Exactly.
What made me the most upset was how long he waited to throw the flag. If you see the jersey being pulled, grab your flag and throw it. And it was 5-6 seconds, I felt like, before he threw it.
And that's the thing. And that adds to my point, which is it's not the right call. The right call is holding. It was defensive holding when he pulled the jersey. And the fact that he waited that long and the fact that he called defensive pass interference, it would have been the same result. But they clearly weren't calling the hold. They weren't calling the pull of the jersey. They were calling the flop. They were calling him flipping out like, oh, that's pass interference. No, that is LeBron level flopping that should not have been rewarded with this late of a defensive pass interference. If they would have waited that long and said holding, I would have side-eyed him because were you just staring at the board up there? They didn't see the hold. They didn't see the actual penalty. They saw the bull crap that receiver did. They called that and waited that long. And like you said, they hadn't called that before. So if you see a guy who flips out like that and maybe got tripped, then no, you don't call that when you didn't call it at all the rest of the game. Now, if you actually saw the holding, you call the holding, fine. That would have been the right call. They didn't even make the right call when they finally decided to pull out their flag. So that's what upset me the most. You didn't even get that part right. You clearly bought in to this guy just throwing his arms in the air and falling down to make sure that you saw that he got held. That's smart move by the receiver. Also the refs, if you're going to be that bad about it, I'm not going to give you you made the right call thing. No, you didn't. You actually made the wrong call, and you gave the Buccaneers a free first down.
Yeah, Matt LaFleur had a reason to be upset. It's Green Bay. It's Rodgers at home at Lambeau for the first time ever in the NFC Championship game. That was talked about all week. Rodgers obviously has had an incredible career. He's been in the NFC Championship game now 5 times. He only has 1 ring, but this was his time to go back to the Super Bowl again. And, man, watching those last couple minutes, to see Green Bay come back from 18 down to cut the lead to 5, and then it was 8. So they're down 8. They have first and goal at the 8-yard line. And I mean, we can talk about NFL coaches in these playoffs. I know Vrabel, the Titans, made some questionable decisions. We've seen all these NFL coaches. We saw McDermott with the Bills yesterday make some questionable decisions. But when did all of a sudden coaches stop being aggressive? Besides Andy Reid, why are these coaches being so conservative on 4th down? When you're down by 8, there's not 5 minutes left. There's 2. I know you have your timeouts. I don't care. There's 2 minutes left. If I was going up against Tyler Thigpen, I still wouldn't give him the ball back. You're going up against Tom Brady, and you're going to give him the ball back with 2 minutes? And I struggle so much with the decision to kick the field goal there. And I don't care if it's from the 8-yard line or the 18-yard line. I still would have gone for it. Because maybe the ref pulls out a flag if the player gets tripped. Or maybe you find Devontae Adams crossing the goal line. But I still, for the rest of Matt LaFleur's career, I will have no idea the decision to kick it. If you're down by 9 points or more, great, kick it. It's a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, and you have Aaron Rodgers. You go for it.
And everybody kept saying the 2 points that they missed, the 2-point conversion. That didn't change the decision. If they went for every extra point, you still go for a touchdown there.
You catch
I'm not even yelling about him not catching it. Like, literally, there were people saying that because they went for 2 and missed it, oh, look at that mistake because you were chasing points. Like, that had no impact on how dumb that play was. Getting an extra point there, getting 1. If they would have went for 1 instead of the 2, wouldn't have helped them. That wouldn't have changed what they did. If they got the 2-point conversion, it doesn't change what they do there. You need to go. You need to score. And like, when you're talking 8 points down, like the idea that, well, we get a field goal, that means now we could win with a touchdown. It's like, oh, you know what helps you win? Getting a touchdown. This is your best chance at a touchdown. You get it now, or you're probably not going to get it at all. They didn't even get the ball.
Yeah, it wasn't 4th down from the 20 or 30-yard line. They were inside the 10. Forget about the next drive if you have one, which we found out they did not. Forget about the next drive. You're inside the 10. That's touchdown territory. Analytics aside, someone has to tell the Packers 8 points is still a 1-possession game. It's not ideal, but it's still a 1-possession game. We've seen teams plenty of times down by 8. They drive down, they get 6, they get 2, they go to overtime. And all of a sudden it's a coin toss. And so I don't understand. Like I said, with 5 minutes, maybe. With 2 minutes, never.
No,
it's like the ghost of Mike McCarthy showed up and whispered into the ear of Matt LaFleur and said, "Mess up Aaron Rodgers. I don't like him."
Did you see the Scooby-Doo meme where Fred pulls off the mask of LaFleur and it's Mike McCarthy? That made me laugh.
I didn't see that.
I did.
Oh man,
that was good. And like I said, I know what LaFleur is going to be thinking about the defensive pass interference that shouldn't have been called. But I don't know. I'm kicking myself. You have Rodgers. Maybe you don't get the 8 yards. Then what's the worst that happens? The Bucs are buried at the 8-yard line. And then maybe you get a stop and you have one more chance to go get 8. But you can't – I don't understand just getting a few points on the board when it's a 1-possession game. So
I'll also say it didn't make sense that Aaron Rodgers is saying – okay, he's one to be like questioning your coach that he kicked the field goal instead of giving you the 4th down. He said, I thought I'd have 4th down. But that doesn't explain why you threw it. If anything, you should have thought, I'm getting a 4th down so I can run it here. And even if they catch me, wherever I'm at, we're that much closer on a 4th down. So I'm not buying. I feel like Rodgers does that a lot too. He throws people under the bus. And I don't care that Rodgers talks a lot of shit. I love it. I don't care that, whatever, direct. There's a lot of ways to describe him. What gets me is those moments when he is throwing people under the bus and you're like, yeah, you could have avoided that. Like, you can't, you can blame the coach for not going in 4th down. You can't pretend like your decision on 3rd down was because you thought the coach was going to do something they didn't end up doing. That was a bad decision. You shouldn't have thrown it there. You should have ran it. And it's tough because there are not a lot of quarterbacks who are good enough to be Aaron Rodgers to figure out, I can run it. I can get in here. And, to blame him for not knowing that he had it wide open. He had to. It was a better decision to go there. That's a tough bang, bang moment. But the fact that it went straight into the dirt, he didn't even have close to a clean throw. It'd be one thing if it just bounced off a receiver like the 2-point conversion. But that one, he didn't really have it. And we all think you have more yards than you do. We see that open field. But there's some NFL defenders that are going to catch up to Aaron Rodgers, who's not quite as fast as he used to be. Still, you're getting a couple yards. That makes it easier to say, we have to go on 4th down. We have to try to get this right here, right now.
100%. We also saw a picture of open field. Rodgers could have ran for the touchdown on 3rd and goal. I don't think he gets in the end zone, but I think he gets to the 3 or 4 yard line. And 4th and goal from the 3 is way easier than 4th and goal from the 8.
And it probably would have been an easier decision for Matt LaFleur to go for it, but no excuse. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're at. I mean, you said earlier, you would go for it on the 18-yard line. I mean, you go for it regardless. But no, Aaron Rodgers should have ran for it, and we can criticize him for all that. But you know what? I think at the end of the day, when it all comes down to it, it was a choke job by Matt LaFleur. He should have gone for it. He should have been more aggressive. And I kind of thought about it before the game got going. I thought back to 2007, the last time the Packers hosted the conference championship game, which turned out to be Brett Favre's last game as a Packer. Now there's talk about, is Aaron Rodgers going to return to Green Bay? So this is kind of interesting. Maybe this could be the last game for Rodgers as a.
It's funny. There's a lot of parallels where you get they drafted Jordan Love, but they only got
drafted Aaron Rodgers.
They waited with Aaron Rodgers 3 years, knew he was good, and then said bye, Brett, and Brett left. Right. In this case, they'd be idiots if they even made that decision. Like at this point, the talk of him being last game of the Packers because they're like, I don't think Rodgers is going to put up with this shit anymore. He's not gonna, like, all right, you saw Mike McCarthy by getting the floor, which worked in the regular season, and he still, was way too conservative in this game. And it wasn't just that play call. That play call was horrendous, and by itself is just such a bad decision. But when we look at other plays that caused the Packers to lose, so Packers had the ball all but 2 minutes in the third quarter, right? They still got beat out 13-7 to remain down 5 because you start the game out, you start the half out with the fumble and let the Bucs score. And if the rest of it, at that time you're taken up, if you have the ball and you still can't get yourself on the board, get yourself back in that game, you wasted so much time that now you are getting those last minute plays where if you don't make the right decision, like, I don't know, go for it on fourth down when you're down a whole touchdown, you're going to lose the game. And part of it is just knowing from the get-go, if you're losing by that much, you need to play faster. And what got him in that situation was, the first half was even until Rodgers throws an INT. You get Packers later settle for a field goal from the 6-yard line. So he does it twice. Twice he decides Aaron Rodgers isn't good enough to go get him a touchdown. Right. You get Bucs are grifted with the Greg Williams special. Just let Scotty Miller. Woo!
So stupid.
Just gone. Then Jones fumbles at a half, so Buccaneers go down and score 28-10 there. You had an even first half. Buccaneers came out on fire, and then you got yourself back into the game. You should have been able to close that gap, and instead, it's weird that it wasn't that Tom Brady came out playing so well, which, once again, toot my own horn, said last week, forget about Tom Brady as the closer. He has to open this game if they're going to beat the Packers. That's what he did, and they pulled it off. But they did that, and the Packers still were going to stay toe-for-toe with them. But conservative play calling got them down. Then you get those mistakes. You don't know where it's going to go. But in this case, it's against the Packers. It's a fumble that gives it back to the Buccaneers. And that's why you can't settle for field goals, because there can be moments like that not only did you leave points on the board, you then gave the Buccaneers points through a future mistake. And if you're not down 28-10, you win the game. The Packers were the better team, and they lost to the Buccaneers. Like, I mean, that's my biggest takeaway is it wasn't about the holding at the end. It was about that stupid play call, but it's also about the fact that the Packers did multiple things to compound the fact that they were having a bad game, but they were indeed the better team, and it didn't matter because Tom Brady found a way to get to Super Bowl number 10.
Yeah, I do want to point out another reason why this falls on Matt LaFleur, and that's also you have to control your defense. You have to go to your defensive coordinator, and you gotta tell him to not, like you were just talking about the Greg Williams special, having a single corner on a single man-on-man matchup with Scotty Miller, who is way faster.
Yeah, it can't be Scotty Miller. Like, of all the guys that you're going to do single coverage, it can't be Scotty.
No.
That's the only reason he's in the game.
You gotta have help over the top. You gotta bring a safety or bring somebody to help out King, because King just got exposed big time.
He didn't have a good game. He had a tough time.
It was more than one time, too. I mean, he got exposed multiple times. I mean,
the defensive pass interference. I mean, he had every play that the big Bucs play. It was King. It was King there, which isn't all his fault. The last one wasn't King's fault. It was coverage. The first one, I couldn't tell how much I wanted to give Brady credit for the over the top to Evans versus, okay, he mistimed the jump. But it's like, if he times the jump right, does Evans still get the ball? Because I think he does. You know, so he looks like a fool, and we add it to the collection. But yeah, King just, it was aesthetically definitely felt like the worst game from a cornerback in a conference championship game ever. Probably wasn't, but God, it felt like it.
But point is that falls on Matt LaFleur too. You got to be responsible. You're the head coach. And at the end of the day, it falls into your record. It goes on your permanent record as a loss.
Yeah, watching the Packers-Bucs game, it felt like if they would have played 10 times, I honestly think Green Bay wins 8. They were the better team.
Agreed.
But you have Bruce Arians taking risks where Matt LaFleur wasn't. And if you're going to lose in the playoffs, I'd rather lose taking risks than playing it safe. That I feel like that play you guys have mentioned a couple of times, it's Tampa Bay has the ball. There was 6 seconds of the clock. They added 2 more. So there's 8 seconds left at the 38, 39-yard line. I honestly felt like Brady was going to do a short 5-yard pass and then get out of bounds and then kick a field goal. And Bruce Arians is like, no, we're going for a 7. And, of course, Brady makes a great throw. And instead of 14-10 or even 17-10 at half, all of a sudden it's 21-10. And then you have that fumble to start the third quarter that makes it 28-10. So the last 20 minutes, Green Bay was the far better team. They outscored the Bucs 16-3 from that point on. But it didn't matter. You can't get down 18 points in the postseason and expect to win.
Right.
Will you win sometimes? Yes. But most of the time, if you're down 18 points in the second half, that's a loss. That's the game you're going to lose.
Just ask the Buffalo Bills back in 1992. That wild card against the Houston Oilers.
Right.
32-3 or something like that.
Hey, crazy things happen, and some of the crazy thing, I guess the thing that would probably be the most surprising was that the Packers were killing the Bucs thereafter. You know, it's like they got themselves in the hole, they came back, but then Tom Brady throws 3 straight interceptions, and they get a touchdown off the first one, but 2 3-and-outs. If either of those possessions turned into points for the Packers, we're having a completely different conversation right now. So
absolutely.
It was crazy to have that happen. Crazy. And if there's anything that goes against Rodgers, it's that. They put it in his hands on 2 possessions, all passes, and he went 3-and-out both times. Those were just as much the difference in the game as what happened thereafter. Although there's the difference between not succeeding when the pass rush is bearing down on you and stopping you. That happens in a football game. When you make the decision to kick a field goal, you take it out of the hands of your quarterback to try to figure it out, try to make it happen. And so that's the main takeaway is I think one of my guys I went to school with, Brendan Dorzinski, he's up at the radio station in Topeka talking about Chiefs and stuff. Like he's a Packers fan. And so he posted, it's like, you got to trust Rodgers there. And it's like, I don't care if it's Nate Sudfeld. Like, you pass the ball. Like, that is a loser's decision. And the fact that it's Rodgers makes it that much worse because Rodgers is that much more capable. But that's the wrong decision 100% of the time. And, Colin had to take a shot at my boy, Tyler Thigpen. Thiggy Pop put up points, baby. And right there, they didn't trust Aaron Rodgers to do so. And that's not a good sign. So, that bromance that was building with Rodgers and LaFleur, it dimmed out pretty quick there. So that's another thing to keep an eye on as we go forward. Any other things from the conference championship games we want to hit before we start going on to some other topics, maybe a little college hoops here real fast?
We didn't point out the little fiascos that happened towards the end of the Chiefs-Bills game and how the officials let that. Take it away, Justin. Explain to everybody what happened, because it was confusing for anybody watching, because nothing happened is what I learned. It was confusing for the officials. They took forever trying to decide who was going to get what. And I'll just say this. The Chiefs did nothing wrong. I mean, that was all on Buffalo. I mean,
they did one thing wrong, and that makes it even. They had one guy commit a personal foul. You know what that means?
What did he do? What did Okafor do? Like,
I thought I knew what offsetting penalties meant, and now I have no idea what they mean.
They don't know what
personal fouls. The funny thing was the game was over. Like, at that point, you look at the score, the game was over, and the refs took so long. And I think the refs honestly didn't know what to do, so they said, "Hey, you guys, the game's over. If we say these offset, we can get out of here in 5 minutes."
Well, that's the rule, is for it to offset. But like, what's the how many people got ejected?
No, none.
0.
Nobody.
So if you're not going to eject anybody, the moment you know that it's one on each side, you stop. There's not a conversation at that point, unless there was just one guy that's probably a similar mindset as us that's sitting there like, you got to give something to the Bills, right? Now the ref's like, the rule book says no, and he's just arguing for 20 minutes. Like, that's the only explanation, because the moment you know there's one on each team, you're done. Yeah. It's offsetting. You move on. Figuring out the 5th name to yell, and the ref that was like apparently off camera. I don't even know how his audio kept getting picked up, but you got the one ref saying it, but before he says it each time, you got like 58 penalty, and like and he just did it like 6 times, and all for it to be like not happening. I think the Joshua Briscoe, one of Justin's colleagues, he posted one that was pretty funny. That was like literally the announcer's like, you gotta show that this means something. You can't act like this, even if it's just for the kids. You got to show that you can't act this way. Mm-hmm. And we got offsetting penalties, so we're gonna go back to the play. Like, nothing happened. They wasted all that time telling us it was important to make an example out of people. It's like, nope, offsetting, because that's the rules.
And look, listen, I mean, the players can do a better job of controlling themselves, and that's absolutely true. But I mean, come on, you're the official crew. You got to be out there, and you got to handle this better. And that was just a piss poor job by the NFL and the officiating. And I'll just say for the record, I think they knew what to do. They just didn't give a crap. They didn't want to. They love wasting time. That's their job. It's part of their paycheck.
I'm curious now. What do you have to do to get ejected from an NFL game? When I first saw it, I was always ejected. Maybe I'm soft, but that feels like when the play's over, that feels like he can be tossed for that. But I guess not.
It's also because it was building up. Like, they weren't getting personal fouls, but they were having extracurricular. They were trying to make hits to hurt the Chiefs down late in that game. And it was like they stopped playing football and they were trying to injure people. And for them to do it so blatantly after a play and to have it be like 6 guys, and at the end you're just like, yeah, I don't know which one did enough to get kicked out of the game. Like, whatever it needed to do, the guy who started it, like, whatever you need to do. But don't waste 20 minutes to do offsetting penalties, which, once again, like I said, I don't think it's a great rule. Like, I don't care enough to argue it needs to be changed, but that's always been the rule. It shouldn't take you 20 minutes. Once you know that there's one on each side, I don't need you to figure out the 6 guys who did it, unless it actually is going to have an impact, which it isn't, and is something that the league could review and post. If it is like you now have that on your resume, is like, you're getting in the Vontaze Burfict category. We're putting a notch up for you. That's not what they were doing, and they could do that outside of the game. They didn't need to figure out the 6 guys to tell who got a penalty. Waste of our time. But I think that's all for NFL action. I did want to jump to college hoops. We had a pretty good conversation about it last week. The main thing that I thought was fun, though, I had written this well before we had that conversation. I wanted to talk about who outside of Gonzaga and Baylor could compete for the other 2 number 1 seeds going into the tournament. And Nick Springer's argument was that every team that's not Gonzaga and Baylor is bad. It doesn't matter who Baylor was beating because all Big 12 teams are bad. But maybe KU would be the one team that wouldn't be bad. That was a quick nope, and they're knocked out of the running short term, unless you guys want to make the argument. But when we're trying to figure out who is the other 2 number 1 seeds, who are those other teams that right now, obviously nobody's on the same level as Gonzaga and Baylor, but who is there running up to try to be 3rd, 4th, 5th? Justin, we'll start with you.
The other 2 number 1 seeds, I was looking this up a little bit ago. This is according to Joel Nardi, and of course this won't be the case, come when the tournament starts. But right now, it's the other 2 are Michigan and Villanova. And I think if the Final Four was today, I think all 4 number 1 seeds would make it to the Final Four. But
you're going to take chalk in a COVID year where they have to go play at Indy and nobody can keep a winning streak going. You're going to go chalk.
Hey, there's a couple, maybe a 2 or 3 that could make a run. I mean, it's Elite 8 or maybe Final Four, but I think right now, I think outside of Gonzaga and Baylor, I think those are the top 2 best teams. But you never know what could happen. But I just think right now, I think all 4 number 1 can make it to the Final Four.
I think that's true in a year. It just doesn't happen very often. And in a year like this, I wouldn't put money on it, is I guess my main thing.
That's fair.
I do think that there's a little argument. I don't know. I don't think you can have a year where Gonzaga and like Houston are both number 1 seeds. I think you can only give it to one that's played out of a big conference. Texas is an interesting one because it depends on what they do down the stretch. Mm-hmm. If Texas is able to finish in a way that puts them up there, I think, maybe I overvalue what, the Big 12, how good it is year to year. And, if I go by Springer's, basically, Big 12 sucks this year. So Texas isn't getting really good wins. I do think that they're a team that if I was to say, I don't know what it takes to be a number 1 seed. I think it takes just beating Baylor. If they get that 1 win over Baylor and they can otherwise not have some bad upset losses down the stretch, Texas could move themselves into that 4th number 1 seed. But yeah, it's probably just going to be Villanova and Michigan. And the big thing is it's not clear. Like where Gonzaga and Baylor is clearly that next level, that big group after that, it's not clear of those where it is. Like I think between 3 and 10, it's hard to figure out who's actually better than who else. So there can be some movement. There are a lot of teams who could get themselves into the argument for being a number 1 seed, definitely a number 2 seed as we start pushing down the home stretch of the college basketball season. Colin, when you're looking at this, I'll let you jump into KU if you want to. If you just want to go further into the who are the possible top teams, who are you impressed with in the top 10 right now? Just don't say Missouri.
I'll start with KU, and not because I'm impressed by them, but there seems to be. I mean, there's this after KU lost to Oklahoma on Saturday, which is a game they could have won. It was a 3-point game with a few minutes left. They had a 1-point lead with 10 minutes left. It was pretty even. Oklahoma played better down the stretch. They deserved to win. But as soon as the game was over, you have all this. Bill Self loses 3 straight. KU loses 3 straight for the first time in 8 years, which is true. They're all against NCAA tournament teams. One is against maybe the best team in the nation, maybe the second best team. They're all on the road. The last time KU lost 3 straight games, they won the Big 12. They won the Big 12 tournament, and they were a 1 seed. Now, I'm not saying this is not 2013 KU. They're not going to be a 1 seed. They're not going to win the Big 12. But if you look at KU's schedule, I don't care about the Tennessee game. I think the Big 12 SEC challenge should be played in November or December. I think Bill Self's a lot more worried about conference games than going to Tennessee. However, obviously that might not be a win. You look at KU's games coming up, they could reel off 5 or 6 in a row. And obviously, we'll see if that happens. I think that, KU's still going to be a 2 or a 3 seed. And maybe that's just me trusting Bill Self too much. But I think that he's lost 3 in a row before, and he's responded really well. I think we're not that far away from being special. However, once you get beyond Gonzaga and Baylor, I think Villanova is real just because I've watched a little bit. Obviously, Jay Wright knows what he's doing, but it's Colin Gillespie and it's Jeremiah Robinson Earl. They have veteran guys that are really, really good. And Villanova is one of those teams, if they're down by 8 with 10 minutes left, I still think, they can come back and win. Whereas some teams, the game's over. Once you get past Villanova, I do think right now Michigan should be the 1 seed, but the team that I am interested in is Iowa. And they've had some bad losses. They're inconsistent, but they can also score 100 points against anyone. Iowa's a team that should get upset early in the NCAA tournament, but I kind of like them. If they get hot, Garza's special, and they just shoot so many threes.
They do.
I kind of like Iowa to make a run, just because they're one of those teams that they can get a 20-point lead and then it's over because they make a few in a row. So I kind of like Iowa. The Big Ten has some good teams at the top and then a bunch of trash at the bottom. You could also argue the Big 12 with 5 or 6 ranked teams. They have some trash at the bottom. So my biggest concern is just with all the games being canceled. Is the NCAA tournament going to be in March? And if it is, you have teams that have played 25 games, 21 games, 18 games. And I know the selection committee is going to take all of that, and do the best that they can. But there was one night last week, I think it was last Wednesday. I'm looking at the top 25 scoreboard. You had 2 games that were being played and 5 were canceled or postponed. And so I'm like, if we're canceling or postponing 70% of our games, how are we going to do conference tournaments? How are we going to do who's the conference champion? If one team plays 12 games, one team plays 18, that doesn't really make sense. And I know that's bringing in a larger topic, but I'm curious what you guys think about how it's going to wrap up, because we are towards the end of January. March Madness is 6-7 weeks away. It's not that far away.
Yeah, I would say my biggest concern is when you are talking about like KU and having the talent and trusting Bill Self, because I've seen Bill Self do it as he closes out a normal Big 12 schedule, not a COVID schedule where games are getting canceled. You don't even know how many he's going to get to play. Are they going to have the tournament? There's so many factors that makes it harder to just say, well, Bill Self will work it out in the end because he always works it out in the end. So that's kind of the scary point there in terms of I think I'm less worried about conference and the tournament than I am the regular season. I think it's going around, not in a bubble, traveling. Like those are the things that are going to constantly get you positives that are going to knock teams out. I think once the thing is in order, the only concern I have is that the NCAA is so bad at planning anything. But if you start figuring out for conferences and you say, okay, we can advance, we are bringing all the teams in, they're staying at the hotel, we're going to do, COVID tests, and we're going to make sure everybody's clear. Once you try to mimic the NBA bubble and do it in that same way, it's already something that's proven to work. You just have to actually make sure it's secure. And from there, you can get this to run without a hitch, like that isn't the scary part. For me, I think the cancellations just make sense. We are at some of the biggest spikes, even as we're getting the vaccine, the numbers have started to go down, but not from the vaccine yet. And you're in a position where, during the winter months, that is normally when the flu would kick up. Makes sense that COVID would have another spike there. It's not, I don't even blame them for the games being canceled. It's once you start playing, this was going to happen, and it happened. They're trying to get through it. They're pushing through. And I think that, I'm not talking about the ethics of it and whether it was a good decision to play a college basketball season this year with how many positive tests they've had and how many games have had to be canceled. But I'm less scared of the tournament where you can put in more of the precautions, more of figuring out everybody here has been tested negative for a long enough time to know that they don't have it. And then just doing your best to make sure that COVID doesn't enter the building, doesn't enter this group, and you can keep them healthy throughout tournament play. I think that is less scary to me than the idea of a season, which a college basketball season where you're flying across, KU's going to West Virginia and back to Texas and then back to KU. Like that was a horrible idea from the get-go. They should have never done this season without having bubbles that were like send 16 teams to the Northeast for, 2-3 weeks, have them play games, and then they leave. That should have been the process from the get-go. The fact that NCAA, just like they did with NCAA football, didn't take the time to figure out a better plan is, it's not surprising because that's what the NCAA does. In this case, though, it was borderline criminal that they didn't come up with a better way to conduct this season.
Did you notice on the KU schedule how they rescheduled Iowa State? They got to play Iowa State twice in 3 days. That's insane.
That's what happens.
Which for a team that's 2-9, it should be 2 wins for KU, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
They're 2-7 Iowa State, and I looked at KU's current record in some of their games, some of the close games they won. Boy, KU could be the opposite. They could be 5-10 right now, being in Kentucky's level, which is just insane.
Put some respect on Bill Self winning close games.
He just took the words right out of my mouth, man. I was just about to say Bill Self, Hall of Fame coach for a reason.
I mean, I will say that like most teams, you could probably take 3 or 4 wins that are close, and that could have gone the other way. In this case, they have had tough games where like Baylor was 8. But they turned that into a game, even though it looks like final score doesn't look like they had a chance. There was a version of that game where they could have pulled off a big win. Obviously, they didn't. Baylor's a really good team. They closed out. Those close games, Oklahoma State should have won that game. They choked it away, which doesn't happen very often with a Bill Self team. Gonzaga was a runaway, but, there's just been games this year where maybe it's close, but yeah. Bill Self gets his team to win those games. I'm not going to look back and be like, they could have been worse. They could have been better. They could right now be better. And a few things that they might need to fix. But I know one that I start seeing around, and we'll only talk about this if you guys want to, but people looking over at, grass is greener, Quentin Grimes over there in Houston. How much better would this KU team be if Quentin Grimes didn't transfer?
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, that's one more talented player you add to that team.
Yeah.
Better question. How much worse is KU last year with Quentin Grimes?
No, Grimes is playing really well. Houston's a legit top 10 team. They're really good. I think that this K team has some things to work on. I still think we should play David McCormick less minutes, even though he has his good games. I still think I like Jalen Wilson at the 5 for as much time as possible. Is going to give us the best chance to win. I'm curious what you guys think. Right now, KU is 4-4 in the Big 12. The first time Self's ever been 4-4 through 8 games at KU. Let's
first
say
time since '89.
Yeah, let's say hypothetically KU plays all 18 conference games. What do you predict for their Big 12 record?
Well, they're 4-4 right now. Maybe 13-5, maybe 14-4, maybe something like that. They would probably go on in our typical Bill Self KU type run, maybe just because that's just how it's worked in recent years. And until proven otherwise, I know KU lost their streak a couple years ago when K-State and Tech tied when they shared the Big 12 title. But every year it's it goes through Lawrence, just like how in college football in the Big 12 it goes through Norman, until proven otherwise. So yeah, if it was a normal 18 round robin Big 12 schedule, I think KU, after a little bit of a hiccup start, they would go on in their typical Bill Self run.
Are we saying they have 11 games left or what?
They have 10 conference games left.
Is that how many?
10 conference in Tennessee.
10?
Right, exactly. Yeah, 10 conference games plus Tennessee.
I think they probably win 7 of the 11. If they get their shit together, they can move it up to 8 or 9. Yeah. It's just hard because
that'd be good for them.
Like even with the record for KU, the way I know Bill Self finished seasons, just put Baylor as a loss, and if they happen to win, be excited when it happens. Texas is a tough one. Then I think Texas Tech and West Virginia, those are toss-ups. I think a really big sign of how good they'll do. One is making sure you do beat out Kansas State. They always come in with a fire, even if they're not quite good enough. They shouldn't be.
You will crush my Wildcats.
I'm hoping, but the fact is they fight, and so don't slip up. That's a slip up game right there. So
it's a done deal. I'm sorry.
Oklahoma State will be the one. If they can come back and this time just close them out, beat them at home, that'll be a pretty good sign that they're getting things on the right track. But yeah, I think I think in the 7 I counted Tennessee, which isn't fair to Tennessee to just mark it as a win. That's another toss-up. So with those 3 toss-ups, it's right in the 7 to 8 win range. And if they do what we've seen Bill Self do, they can get it closer to 9. And the only ones I would say is you're going to lose to Baylor, and then between like Texas Tech, West Virginia, right. I imagine, and Tennessee, I imagine you have to lose at least one of those. So best case scenario is 9 wins, but 7 is probably the better option.
Yeah. That puts KU possibly on the number 2 line, number 2 seed, number 3, something like that.
I think would be a 2. I feel like right now KU's a 3. They could drop to a 4 with their wins so far. I don't think they drop below that. But if they play good, they could be up to a 2 seed based on how things go in other teams losing games.
I think they need the 9 wins to be a 2 seed. I think it has to be best case scenario. Right. It's probably 3. If they slip a little bit, it's 4. And then it could just be 4 based on the losses. And then what did everybody else do? There are just a lot of teams ahead of them right now. So they are kind of on that edge between 3 and 4 that going 7 wins doesn't guarantee you even the 3 spot. So it should. It probably should. It should be a 3, and you should be on just barely on the outside of the 2. But we've seen some crazy stuff happen from NCAA tournament committees. So I wouldn't guarantee 7 wins gets you into that 3, and then 8 or 9 gets you back to the 2 range.
You know what's also crazy?
I was going to say one of the things that'll be interesting to watch will be that's a little bit different for KU is I don't know how Texas will play out. Right now they're a top 5 team. They have some of the tougher games ahead of them, but with Baylor and Texas being so good, that'll be interesting to see if the selection committee rewards KU. Oh, they're in such a good conference. We'll give them a 3 seed. Or, they finished 3rd or 4th in the Big 12. Let's give them a 4 seed. That'll be kind of interesting because the top of the Big 12 is so much better. But like I said, I know Baylor's good. You don't have to convince me. Texas, they have some moments So we'll see how they finish on the stretch as your schedule gets tougher and tougher.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the stretch where Shaka Smart kind of goes back to what we were accustomed to seeing him in the last few years at Texas. I'm still waiting for that because I'm still not convinced that they're a lot better. They're more experienced. Obviously, they got better talent, and it's showing. And man, that's a positive compared to previous years under Shaka Smart, where we were just going, oh, he's just a mid-major coach, which maybe overall he is. He's just better being at a mid-major school. But maybe this is the year where he's proven it finally. But I was going to point out about the 4-4 record for KU. First time since the 1988-89 season that they're 4-4 in conference play. And that was the year they were put on probation and didn't make the tournament. I mean, crazy.
And then I was born in '89. They've been to every NCAA tournament since.
Yeah, you've been the good luck charm. It seems like
I was born in '91. They just started making Final Fours when I was born. So you had to wait some years.
I was born the next year, and they were making Final Fours. And Roy still had a full set of gray hair, or not gray, but there was more colored hair.
Less gray.
Less gray. That's what I meant to say.
It never had real color, but it was not as gray as it is now.
Dag gum.
I did want to say for Texas, I think they're really good. I think the one thing being in terms of matchup, I think that first game against KU, they ended up, getting that victory. It looked like a very strong win, but honestly, they shot way better threes than they do the rest of the time. And that's even when they're playing well. They don't shoot threes nearly as well as they did against KU. And KU missed threes that were not like forced shots. They were open shots that just didn't go in. And that was when KU's offense had not fallen off the rails. If that flips at all, if Texas misses a few more and comes back down to earth, if KU is closer to even just their average, that's a game. And Texas probably still wins, but KU could have won. And it's not this blowout where it's like, not sure if KU can keep up with Texas because Texas wins by 25. Like that was 25 based off of crazy shooting that doesn't reflect what either of those two teams really do. It maybe reflects how KU's played since then. They still haven't got their long distance shooting back on track. But in terms of Texas has not had another game that looks like what they did against KU. And it wasn't from KU just playing bad 3-point defense or anything. So it was kind of an anomaly that just made it look that much like there was that much bigger of a gap between Texas and KU. I think there was a gap that we didn't see yet, but not by nearly as much.
Right. I think the medicine for a 3-game loss might be Thursday night playing against the TCU team that KU just beat by 30 a few weeks ago. And so maybe they'll get back on track. But like I said, after that, it's in Knoxville for a top 10 Tennessee team that's starting to struggle. But like I said, I think that I want to see what Self does in February. There's a lot of games still to go, and you could easily go all of a sudden, we've won 8 of 9, or we've lost 6 of 9. So
there also it might not be a lot of games in February, so we're hoping for that as well.
Right.
Yeah, I think with that, I mean, for me, and I'm glad, Colin, you brought it up. It was in my rundown, but I didn't actually really plan on talking about it. I just had it sitting there talking about having basketball games going. What would it look like going in Indy? That is something I'm more optimistic about that than I was about the season at all. Similarly with the NBA, and I thought maybe they'd fix it. They've started canceling a bunch of games and they just kind of waited it out. Thought maybe they'd like restructure their rosters to find a way to make it happen. And really they just should have shut the game down and they should go to that same, and it's tough. The NBA players already went through a bubble and they know that one-off for playoffs is fine. Convincing guys it's a great idea to be isolated that way for months on end for a regular season is that much harder to do.
Yeah, but look at Kyrie Irving.
I think that honestly, if you just tried to change it to the bubble where it's, okay, you're going to this location for however many games. And the NBA did a version of that. They were doing more back-to-backs in the same building night after night. So it's like, we already did the protocol. We know this game is safe. Let's keep with that rather than sending them on a plane immediately after. But those type of moves, it's interesting to see how different leagues handle it, or just be the NFL and be like, all right, strong protocols, Please don't break them, and hands off the rest of the way. Let's see if we make it. And they made it. They just refused to not make it. So that was one way to handle it. The other leagues are making different decisions to find a way to keep it going. And it's hard to predict what will happen, but I do think a bubble format like that is a little more predictable. So hopefully we get to that. Did either of you guys want to talk any NBA, or do we want to close out with one little tiny couple-minute jump to talk about McGregor getting knocked out on Saturday night?
Well, I guess you want to maybe talk about, I guess, what you wanted to talk about for the last 3 weeks, the James Harden trade.
Honestly, I did not do enough research. I had it pegged on there. Did not stop to see what James Harden has done since he's gone to the Nets, what the other players have gone elsewhere. I did see that Jared Allen just can't get a starting job in the NBA. Like, now he's behind Andre Drummond. Like, what is happening? That Jared Allen is just having the best, plus minus you've ever seen. Is this great young center, and they're like, nah, go sit down. We don't need you.
It's the Cleveland Cavaliers of all teams. I mean, without LeBron James, that franchise is a turd bucket. I mean,
I thought they were getting Jared Allen because that was their way out of having Andre Drummond. But no, Andre Drummond's in the game. Jared Allen's getting bench minutes, and I honestly couldn't tell you which is worse: having to be put on the bench for DeAndre Jordan or be on the bench for Drummond. But Jared Allen just can't get it worked out. But in terms of the actual trade, everybody cares about James Harden. The biggest thing being, I'm not sure this is a great trade, even if Kyrie didn't decide to step away, then get sort of suspended from having some sort of, just being out and about, breaking the COVID protocols, all this stuff that I have to apologize to my friend Nick Adams, who came on the pod and immediately said, let's wait for the Kyrie meltdown. I'm like, but they have a good team now, and they have what they want. This is the bromance. They have Steve Nash as a coach, and it took no time at all for Kyrie to get it. And I get, like, they're going through crazy stuff right now, and we know Kyrie is temperamental, but it does seem like Kyrie is just upset that Steve Nash is playing the best lineups, Like, it was trying to get Jared Allen in more than DeAndre Jordan. Like, nope, can't have that. We put together a super team. You need to find a way to make the best lineups possible with our favorite guys. That's it. And that's going to be a tough spot for Steve Nash, because Steve Nash doesn't care about that. Steve Nash played on a Suns team where obviously he was the driver of the action, but it was all about passing. It was all about making every player better who was on the court. And he's not going to have a good time going with somebody like Kyrie, who's like, I'm not happy unless my buddy's on the court. So then you bring in James Harden, which is Kevin Durant's buddy, but doesn't seem clear that Kyrie Irving okayed this, was talked about that. Now, they had talked about the trade well before it was made. Obviously, we were talking about it at the beginning of the year, but Kyrie's not away from the team when you finally pull the trigger. That's not a good sign of saying, we talked with Kyrie, we made sure he's okay with this, and we also made sure he's okay with the people we sent elsewhere. I think he was, because you're just getting rid of other people who might take the ball out of Kyrie's hands, but James Harden is definitely going to take the ball out of Kyrie's hands. When you look at the trade, and I'll start with Colin. I know Justin's a big Lakers fan. Colin's closer to the NBA head, or at least LeBron hater. When you look at when you look at that trade, do you think that this is a smart move for the Nets? Because, I mean, just having 3 superstars, how could that be a bad decision?
Yeah, right now I think it's a smart trade because it makes the Nets have the most talent in the East. Doesn't mean they're going to go to the finals, but I will say this. All it takes for this to be a successful trade is for the Nets to get one championship. Whether it's in 2021 or 2023, I don't think they win it this summer. But if the Nets in this big 3, if they win it in the next 3 or 4 years, if Harden gets his ring, Kyrie gets another one, KD gets another one, then it's a success. It'll take a lot of work, but to me, that's I'm not going to say multiple rings because the NBA has so much talent in the West. I don't think they can get more than one, but I do think this Brooklyn team, and mostly because I think Kevin Durant at times is the best player in the world, and in the finals, I think he's good enough to win a best of 7. So I don't think it'll be this year, but I think this Nets team can win a championship in the next 36 months. And if they do, I would say this is a successful trade, just because that's how it works. You make big decisions to get a championship.
All right, so before I let Justin jump in, I do want to say, Colin, if I'm looking at this team and I'm thinking one championship, I think it's 0 or it's multiple. I think, and obviously with Kyrie, he's such a impossible figure to predict. He runs away from championships in Cleveland, so it's hard to say he's just going to want to stick it out because they win. But I think if you get it to work at all, then you win a championship and you're in the East. Your biggest competitor is a Bucs team that has already shown just good, like not even superstar filled teams. A team like the Toronto Raptors can shut them down. If you have, Miami, where I think Jimmy Butler's earned the right to at least be like a superstar, like backup. Like he's like when other superstars can't go, Jimmy Butler gets to step in. He gets some designation of superstar, but otherwise is all about the talent around them, just playing good basketball and shutting them down. For that to be the juggernaut of the East, they should make the finals. Mm-hmm. And I think if they make it, though, like if they can win one time, if they can knock off a Lakers team, or if the Clippers get it together and they can knock off a Clippers team, then that should be good enough to win multiple years. Like if you can't, then like I think you win 0. I think you can't get to the finals if the Bucs knock you off this year. This breaks up in 2 years, and they don't get a chance to try to win a championship.
Right. And this will make me look silly in a couple years, so go ahead and make fun of me. I think there's a better chance they win 2 finals than 0.
I said Kyrie wouldn't throw a hissy fit like a month and a half ago, so I look stupid immediately. Immediate return on investment. Justin, I'll let you jump in for the conversation, or you seem like there was something else happening that you got excited about there, so take it away.
Yeah, I just got a alert on my phone about Shaka Smart. He just got COVID.
Whew. This is a tough year.
That's a tough break for Texas. So let's now really see what they're made of without their head coach. But no, to jump in on the whole James Harden trade, I think like what Colin said right now, I mean, it's a really good trade right now on paper. But my thing is let's get deeper into the season, especially if they're not on the clear top of the Eastern Conference, which I'll just say I think they will be, but let's say if they're not and they're getting into tighter, more important games down the stretch, let's see how that big three, that's if Kyrie Irving does come back and does contribute and does play with the team. Let's see how those 3 guys function together, and maybe they could play well, but there's a possibility they may not. And I'm thinking about the possibility of there just being tight, important games, and maybe the Nets could have a collapse, maybe. But it'll just be so interesting to see how those 3 guys mesh together. And if they do well, then they're probably the clear favorite to win the Eastern Conference and represent the conference in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the tough part is normally about 20 games in, that's when you can start to get a kind of feel. It won't necessarily be set in stone, but there's some outlier games early. 20 games in, you can start to feel, okay, these are the good teams, right? Well, one, it's a COVID year, so the first 10 games was basically like training camp, was basically like a preseason. It took a while for any of these teams to start to get into regular season shape. And then if you're the Nets and you trade in the middle of that, if you're 8 games in and you're like, bye Harden, what's up? That puts you in I wouldn't even say it's a disadvantage, but we now have to almost restart the clock on figuring out who the Nets are. Yeah. And who I thought the Nets are, even when they weren't winning, they won early, and then it was like, I think they started out 4-4 maybe. They played really well at times. But the main thing I was looking was, okay, over 20 games, will they start to be a team that they are just as good, like depth-wise, as we saw in previous years, where a team with no superstars, with Kevin Durant out, Kyrie out, were able to make it to the playoffs, right? If those other players can work around Kevin Durant and Kyrie playing, that should be unstoppable. Like, that should be what gets you there. Now, to pull it Harden, the only reason I think I wouldn't give just the normal, like, it's 3 superstars, you should be better with a superstar, is they had to give away a really good team to get James Harden on there. And you don't even know if Kyrie is going to come back and play. That puts you in the boat of, you were basically like, I think you're better off with James Harden versus Kyrie if it's you got those 2 trying to win you games. but now you have less of the rest of the roster there. You're trying to figure it out. You're going to have a delay on everybody else as they're rounding into shape. You're still figuring out who this team is and how they play. Luckily, James Harden has a game where 1 minute he looks obese and the next minute he's putting up triple doubles. So he can work from nothing. He's not too concerned that you have to figure out chemistry. Who needs chemistry when you're James Harden? But it's a weird thing that now we have to kind of wait and see what they do. But to this point, it's not a collapse if they don't get it together. They're not together right now. They're 10-8. They're not. They're in the middle of the Eastern Conference, and there are a lot of other teams that are showing we're really good. One of them being the actual top team in the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia, who was the other front runner to get James Harden. And this is a team that is like, we bring in. My brain just stopped working at the GM for Daryl Morey. We bring in Daryl Morey. He doesn't make any moves, but you go and get Seth Curry, not Steph, Seth, and he's playing like Steph a little bit. Perfect for this team where Ben Simmons can't shoot from deep. Joel Embiid can, but shouldn't shoot from deep too often. And you need those guys around it. Tobias Harris looked like a wasted trade. But when you add Seth Curry to the mix, you get a better coach in Doc Rivers. All of a sudden, that team is getting closer to reaching their potential. The question I have is, if they pulled that trade off, if Daryl Morey got what he wanted and brought James Harden with him to Philly, is this team actually worse? And not just short term, but like long term? Or would it be a bad move to attempt to bring in James Harden where you might have to get rid of Ben Simmons? If you don't, you have to get rid of a lot of other really good pieces. And now you're taking the first chance of you playing as the best team in the Eastern Conference. Joel Embiid playing lights out. Apparently, Shaq ribbing him finally got to him, and now he's working hard. That's a really good team. Would you take that risk if you are Philadelphia to try and trade away a bunch of pieces to get James Harden?
So the 76ers have underperformed in the playoffs the last few years. And I don't think bringing in the king of underperforming the playoffs, James Harden, would have helped. So I actually like the move to not deal with that. Also, I think the best decision the 76ers made was hiring Doc Rivers. I think now that they have a legit coach, they go a lot farther in the playoffs. And I think with the pieces they have, they're not that far away from going all the way to the finals. For me, I'm glad the 76ers didn't give themselves Harden. And not that James's talent isn't there. I just think that organization is better off without him.
Okay, so you say that Doc Rivers is a better coach, but didn't he blow a 3-1 lead last year with the Clippers?
He did. I just think the 76ers have had trash coaches. I'm not saying Doc is the best. I just think that organization has bad coaches and Doc is better. But you have a good point.
Or that's just maybe that's just because the Clippers are just a cursed franchise, maybe.
Right.
Well, I mean, one is it's like, okay, they blew a 3-1 lead. I watched the 76ers, their best performance. Kawhi Leonard had the ball bouncing all over the rim before it went down and ruined that for them. So that was their Game 7 moment that didn't go so well, and everything else has been nowhere close to what the Clippers haven't done anything. But the before this group, this incarnation of the Clippers, Doc Rivers was coaching, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin. They underperformed and still were way more successful than what the Philadelphia 76ers have done so far. So
That's true. That's true.
If I'm trying to look at where Doc Rivers might come up short, I don't think it is without a doubt an upgrade over Mike Brown. The question from there is, when you're talking playoffs, underachieving, like, are you underachieving when you got like the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference? Like, they underachieved. They didn't underachieve in the playoffs. They underachieved the whole season, Colin. So when you're looking at it, I don't think there's been a year where Joel Embiid has played this way. Using Ben Simmons in the right way, having that outlet of both Seth Curry and Tobias Harris, so Ben Simmons' deficiencies aren't as stark on offense, and you only need him to score 12 points a game and do the rest that he can do, be an elite defender. And they made a team that actually fits those pieces. Isn't that crazy? Like, if you come in and you're like, I got 2 superstars, shouldn't I go and get guys that fit around them? That's not what the 76ers were doing. The moment they got rid of Hinkie, it was like, well, we'll win without him. He was just tanking. It was like, no, he actually also knew how to get good players. He just wasn't doing it yet because he was getting you good draft picks. But like, now they have somebody in the front office going to make good decisions, not let Elton Brand screw it up. They're going to have a coach in Doc Rivers who knows what he's doing. Actually, they stole all the good parts of the Clippers, and then like, let's see what we can do. I'm excited for it. I do think, though, it depends on what you had to get rid of. If you have to get rid of Ben Simmons, you're taking a huge risk. But that risk, where you're talking about James Harden not succeeding in the playoffs, though, he never had a Joel Embiid as his big down low. Imagine how good they are, and imagine what their deficiencies were. He goes cold, if the team can't shoot threes, they had literally nothing. Even if they're getting free runs to the basket from Montrezl Harrell. Imagine what it looks like for Joel Embiid when James Harden has the entire defense spread so far out that he just gets to sit there under the basket and just dunk on people. Like, don't worry, Joel. You don't need to make a bad three-point shot. You get to eat. And he already eats. He gets double and triple teamed and he eats. Imagine what happens when James Harden is on the perimeter for you. So there is a top side that I think might have been worth it. But it's also like, I want to see what Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid look together when you actually built a real team around them, when you have a real coach. And no offense to Mike Brown, but he was a better builder than he is game winner. I want to see what these guys can do. So I wouldn't have made the move, but it was, I think, much more intriguing. I think what the capabilities were much better James Harden going to Philly with those two than James Harden going to the Nets, even though Kevin Durant's a much better player and has looked better even with that injury. I still am not. I wouldn't have been excited. I would be more excited if James Harden went to Philly. We'll see if he can still put it together because, you're never going to be a bad team when you have those three guys on the same squad. So it should be interesting to watch. Anything else for sports stuff before we just finish this one on up?
I'm good, man. I think I'm good.
I won't talk about the money I lost on McGregor. But he had that first round, was looking pretty good. And then, man, I should have known going into it, when you win the first fight and it's a rematch, you got to take the loss so that you set up a third fight. And I didn't think that through clearly enough, obviously.
Yeah,
but,
he definitely threw the fight and didn't just get his ass whooped. I think the big thing for McGregor is, and I don't like to go with the cheap answers that try to use euphemisms and whatever else, but he got paid already, he's rich and he doesn't have the same guys he's training with. All of it's changed now. You're not going to have the same hunger. And in the fight game, even if you're elite, it's by inches. It's by a tiny bit. The best guys can get knocked out. And it's much more likely to happen when you're facing a guy who still needs it, still wants it. And you don't really need this fight as much as McGregor wants to come back, wants to still have the spotlight. I think he wants the spotlight now more than he wants everything else. And that's not a dig at his personality type. I think he was just as flamboyant when he was killing people, but that's because he definitely had the fight as well. And that's gone. I'm not really all that interested to see him go anymore because, one, it's just really hard to be a good UFC fighter into your mid-30s. This is a young man's game. He's done. The scary thing is I watched Dana White jump up and excited, and that's good. He's hyping up the UFC, except for the fact that you just lost your cash cow, and you have not built any other superstars. You have made us more intrigued by Conor McGregor's holdouts and waiting out contracts, and you did that so he couldn't get off the contract and eventually demand a bigger one, and you'd have to give it to him because he's too big in this sport. Now you've knocked him out cold, and you're like, yes, we no longer have Conor McGregor holding us over a barrel. You also have no other superstars, and the UFC has finally gotten completely boring. It's always had that problem where now it's kind of reached this tipping point. It's gotten to the peak of every fighter fights exactly the same. Nothing really matters, and nobody stands out. Now it's worse when you don't have a guy like Conor McGregor who can work people up for a fight, even if in this case, he wasn't even ready for it. He wasn't even in the same league. If it's Habib wanting to fight McGregor after a win, I would want to watch it. I don't care about any of them afterwards. And that's not just me being a fair weather UFC fan. It seems like their popularity is starting to peak a bit, and they might be in trouble down the road.
Yeah, I think that Dana White has some work to do, but he's masterfully done, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and he's brought mixed martial arts onto the biggest platform ever. So I know Dana White had a good
labor and don't pay anybody. That's all you got to do.
I know great. Dana White had a good night Saturday. I think it was the most watched UFC fight in 12 months or whatever. But we'll see what happens. He has work to do, especially if McGregor steps away. You're right. He brings money. McGregor brings money. So let's say Conor doesn't fight for a couple years or ever again. What's Dana White going to do? He needs superstars. He needs big names. He needs publicity. So
I'm excited for Brock Lesnar's next match. That's the only thing I care about. Outside of that, don't care too much. But it's always good to get another meme. I don't know if you saw the one. There's the one that's like McGregor. It's Nate Robinson, and then I think it's just Bernie Sanders in his chair. So it's always good for that, if nothing else. I know Justin doesn't care enough to talk about these fighters, but everybody has to enjoy the memes because memes are great. But that's all we have for this episode of Too Many Points on the Tell Me More podcast. We'll be back on Thursday. Like we said, we'll get some more NFL coaching hires, talk about some other stuff. Next week, we'll have a couple pods to talk about the Super Bowl, preview it, see what's happening. Because from this episode, we are very excited. But that's all we have today. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Later.
Chiefs.